I know the exact shape of my daughter's left earlobe. Not because I've seen it recently, but because I spent 3 years tracing it with my thumb while she nursed, while she slept, while she cried, and I walked her in circles at 3 a.m., whispering promises I didn't know if I could keep. She has a freckle on it. A tiny brown dot, no bigger than a pinprick, right where the lobe meets her jaw. I used to kiss it and call it her listening spot. I told her that's where all the good sounds went in: my voice, her father's laugh, the rain on our apartment window. I haven't kissed that freckle in 13 years, but I could still paint it from memory. And on the first day of the shoot, when she walked into my trailer and sat in my chair without recognizing me, the first thing I looked at was her left earlobe. The freckle was still there. My name is Naomi. I'm 38. I've painted the faces of Oscar winners and pop stars and a president's daughter for her wedding. I've worked in heat that melted prosthetics and cold that cracked foundation and humidity that made everything slide off like tears. I've painted bruises on actors who have never been hit and erased bruises on actors who have. I've made 20-year-olds look 80 and 80-year-olds look 30, and I've learned that the face is never just a face. It's a story someone else is telling about you, or a story you're trying to tell about yourself, or most often both at once, layered so tight you can't tell where one ends and the other begins. I became a makeup artist because my mother wanted to be an actress. Vivian Ortega. You might recognize the name if you're into telenovelas from the 90s. She played the villainous aunt, the scheming neighbor, the woman who stole your man and your inheritance in the same episode. She was beautiful and cruel on screen, and off-screen she was just cruel, but she hid it better. She taught me that makeup was armor, that the right contour could make you look innocent when you were guilty, powerful when you were scared, loved when you were alone. She also taught me that children were props, accessories for the narrative. I was Vivian's daughter when she needed sympathy, that poor girl when she needed distance, and my little helper when she needed someone to fetch her cigarettes and validate her delusions of grandeur. I got pregnant at 19. Not on purpose, not by accident, just by being young and in love with a boy who moved to Portland 2 weeks after I told him. Vivian's reaction surprised me. She didn't yell. She didn't call me stupid, though the word hung in the air like cheap perfume. She smiled. The same smile she used on camera right before destroying someone's life. "We'll raise her together," she said. "You finish school. I'll watch the baby. I'm retired now. I have time." I was exhausted. I was 19 and broke, and my mother's offer sounded like grace. I didn't hear the pronoun, "we'll raise her," not "you'll raise her," not "I'll help you," together, as if we were partners. As if Stella were a production we were co-producing. I signed up for makeup school. I worked nights at a diner. I visited Stella on weekends, then every other weekend, then whenever I could get a ride to my mother's house in the valley. Vivian was always warm, always accommodating, always understanding about my busy schedule. She never mentioned that she was telling Stella that she was the mother. That Naomi was the nice lady who visits sometimes. That I was sick and unstable and couldn't take care of you, Mija, but don't worry, I'm here. I found out when Stella was 5. I showed up unannounced with a birthday cake, chocolate, her favorite, with 5 candles I'd bought with tip money. I let myself in with the key I still had, and I heard Stella, my daughter, say to Vivian in the kitchen, "Is the sick lady coming today? I don't like her. She smells like the diner." Vivian saw me in the doorway. She didn't flinch. She put her hand on Stella's shoulder and said, "Stella, this is Naomi. She's your sister. Remember, I told you about her." Stella looked at me with eyes that were mine and a face I'd memorized in the dark. She didn't recognize me, not as her mother, not as anything. I dropped the cake. I didn't mean to. My hands just stopped working. Chocolate frosting splattered across the tile, and Stella laughed, a child's laugh, delighted by the mess, and Vivian smiled, and I understood that I'd been erased. Not by accident, not by time, by design. I tried to fight. I hired a lawyer I couldn't afford. Vivian hired 3, paid for by the residuals from her telenovelas and the generous support of a producer who'd always wanted more than her autograph. She produced documents, custody agreements I'd never signed, psychiatric evaluations from doctors I'd never met, character witnesses who'd observed my erratic behavior. The judge was a fan of Vivian's work. He called her a pillar of the community and me a young woman with admirable ambitions but questionable judgment. He granted Vivian full custody. I got supervised visitation, which Vivian scheduled during my exam periods, my final projects, my first professional gigs. When I missed 3 visits in a row, she petitioned to terminate my parental rights. The same judge approved it. I was 24 and I was legally nobody's mother. I didn't see Stella again for 13 years. I threw myself into work. I became the makeup artist who never said no, who worked 20-hour days, who slept in trailers and learned to do a full face in 15 minutes flat. I worked on student films and music videos and eventually, slowly, real movies. I built a reputation. Naomi Vargas, the woman who could make anyone look like anything, who never asked personal questions, who was professional to the point of invisibility. I never had children. I never married. I kept a photo of Stella at 5 in my wallet until it disintegrated, then I didn't replace it. I told myself I'd moved on. I told myself that some stories end and you don't get a sequel. Then the call came. Superhero franchise, my agent said, big budget. They're rebooting the whole universe. They need a department head who can handle prosthetics, aging, makeup, the works. And she paused, and I should have heard the warning in her voice. The lead is Stella Ortega. You know, Vivian Ortega's daughter. She's huge now. Teenage superhero, coming off age arc, Oscar buzz already. I dropped my coffee. It burned my hand. I didn't feel it. Naomi, you there? I'm here. My voice sounded like it was coming from underwater. When do they need me? 3 weeks for prep, 6-month shoot. They're paying. She named a number that would have made me gasp any other day, and they want you specifically. The director saw your work on The Winter House and loved it. Said you had an emotional understanding of faces. An emotional understanding of faces. I thought of Stella's face. The freckle on her earlobe. The way she used to scrunch her nose when she was thinking, a habit she'd had at 2 that I bet she still had at 18. I'll take it, I said. Great, I'll send the contract. Oh, and Naomi, Vivian Ortega is on set every day. She's Stella's manager. Just so you know, as if that were a small thing. As if I could prepare for it. The way I prepared for prosthetics or blood effects or making a 30-year-old look convincingly 16. I hung up. I looked at my hands, steady, practiced. The hands that had painted 1,000 faces and never once shaken. They were shaking now. I practiced not shaking for 3 weeks. The first day of prep, I arrived at the studio at 5 a.m. I like the empty hours, the quiet before the machine starts. I set up my trailer the way I always do. Brushes organized by size, palettes arranged by temperature, the chair positioned so the light hits from the left where it's most flattering. I was adjusting my mirror when the door opened. Stella walked in. She was taller than I expected, taller than me. Her hair was the same dark brown mine had been before I started coloring it, but she'd cut it short, pixie style, the kind of cut that requires bone structure most people don't have. She had it. She had my bone structure, my mother's bone structure, the architecture of faces that cameras love. She was looking at her phone. She didn't look up when she entered. Hi, I'm Stella. You're the new makeup head. Great. I need to be in the chair by 6:30. My mom wants me on set early for blocking. Her voice was deeper than I remembered. Professional. Bored. The voice of someone who'd been working since before she was legal, who'd never known a life that wasn't scheduled and managed and optimized. Of course, I said. My voice was steady. I'd practiced. I'm Naomi. Have a seat, she sat. She still hadn't looked at me. She was texting someone, probably Vivian, probably about call times or calorie counts or which paparazzi to alert about her arrival. I pulled back her hair and clipped it, the way I'd done 1,000 times with 1,000 actresses, and my fingers found the freckle on her earlobe. I didn't touch it. I didn't say anything. I just looked at her in the mirror, really looked, and I saw my mother's eyes in my daughter's face, and I saw myself at 19, exhausted and hopeful and so in love with a person who didn't know I existed. You're left-handed, Stella said, still not looking up from her phone. Yes, most makeup artists are right-handed. You have to stand weird to do my left side. I've had practice. She finally looked up, our eyes met in the mirror. Hers were brown like mine, like my father's, like the color of earth after rain. She frowned slightly, the way she used to when she was trying to place a sound, a voice, a memory from before language. Do I know you? I don't think so, I lied. I've worked mostly in indie films. You probably wouldn't have seen them, She went back to her phone. Well, don't use anything with parabens. My mom says they cause cancer. And I need my contour subtle. The director wants me to look natural, not made up. Like I'm not wearing anything, like you're not wearing anything. The irony was so sharp I almost laughed. She'd been wearing Vivian's makeup her whole life, Vivian's story, Vivian's face. She didn't know what her own face looked like without it. I understand, I said. Natural. Barely there. I started with primer. I worked in silence, the way I always do, letting the face tell me what it needs. Stella's face needed rest. It needed someone to tell her she didn't have to be beautiful today, didn't have to be on, didn't have to perform, But I couldn't say that. I was nobody to her. I was the makeup lady, so I told her a story instead. There's a technique, I said, blending foundation along her jawline, called memory mapping. It's when you paint someone's face to look like a younger version of themselves. For flashbacks mostly, you have to know the face really well, not just the features, but how they move, how they age, what stays the same even when everything else changes. Stella looked up, interested despite herself. How do you learn that? Practice. And I paused, choosing my words. You have to really look at the person. Most people don't. They look at faces the way they look at furniture. Useful, decorative background, but a makeup artist has to see the architecture, the history, the story the face is trying to tell even when the person isn't speaking. That's Stella stopped. She was looking at me in the mirror now, really looking, and I saw something flicker in her expression. Recognition, maybe, or just confusion. That's beautiful. My mom, Vivian, she always says makeup is about illusion, about becoming someone else. Your mother is, I caught myself. Vivian is a talented actress. She understands performance, but makeup can also be about truth, about revealing instead of hiding. Stella was quiet for a moment, then, do you have kids? My hand slipped. Just a millimeter. I corrected it before the brush left a streak. No, I said, I don't. Why not? I thought of all the answers I could give. The professional answer, too busy, too focused, too dedicated to my craft. The honest answer, I had one and she was stolen. And I've been painting other people's faces because I can't bear to look at my own. The answer I gave, I never found the right time. And I think being a parent requires a kind of selflessness I wasn't sure I had. Stella nodded, as if this made sense. Vivian says she sacrificed everything for me. Her career, her relationships, her life. Sometimes I feel like I owe her my whole existence. You don't owe anyone your existence, I said. Words came out sharper than I intended. Sorry, children don't choose to be born. Parents choose to have them. The debt, if there is one, goes the other way. Stella stared at me. I held her gaze in the mirror. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then her phone buzzed, Vivian, no doubt, checking in, controlling, managing, and the moment broke. We should finish, Stella said, looking away. My mom will be here soon. I finished her makeup. I made her look natural. Barely there, exactly what the director wanted. But I also made sure the freckle on her earlobe was visible. I didn't cover it. I never cover freckles. They're maps. They're proof that the face is real. Vivian arrived as Stella was leaving. She swept into my trailer like she owned it, which in a way she did. She'd produced this film through a shell company, another way to control her daughter's narrative. She saw me. She stopped. For just a second, the mask slipped, and I saw the woman who'd stolen my child, who'd erased me, who'd built an entire life on the foundation of my absence. Naomi, she said. The name sounded like a curse in her mouth. I didn't know they'd hired you. Surprise, I said. She recovered quickly. Vivian always recovered quickly. She smiled, the camera-ready smile that had launched 1,000 plot twists. Well, Stella needs to be on set. We'll talk later. She took Stella's arm and led her out. Stella looked back at me, just once, her expression unreadable. Then they were gone, and I was alone in my trailer with my brushes and my memories and a plan I hadn't known I was making until that moment. I didn't confront Vivian. I didn't tell Stella the truth, not directly. Instead, I did what I do best. I watched. I listened. I painted. Every morning, Stella came to my chair. Every morning, I told her stories, not about us, never about us, but about faces. About the actress I worked with who'd survived a fire and wanted her scars visible in her wedding photos. About the politician who cried in my chair because his mother had never told him he was handsome. About the child actor who grew up and couldn't recognize himself without prosthetics because he'd never been allowed to know what he actually looked like. Stella listened. She asked questions. She started arriving early, before her call time, just to talk. She told me about Vivian's management, the diet restrictions, the social media monitoring, the relationships she'd ended because Vivian didn't approve. She told me about the sister she'd had briefly when she was little. Naomi, she said once, and my brush stopped mid-stroke. She was sick, I think, or unstable. My mom says she couldn't handle being a parent, so she left. I don't remember her much. Just she touched her earlobe. The freckle, someone used to kiss this spot. I thought it was my mom, but she says she never did. I kept painting. My hand didn't shake. I'd had 13 years to practice not shaking. Maybe it was someone else, I said. Maybe it was someone who loved you very much and had to leave before she could explain why. Stella looked at me in the mirror. Her eyes were wet, though she wasn't crying. Do you think she ever thinks about me? Every day, I said. I guarantee it. Every single day. Vivian knew something was wrong. She started coming to makeup calls, sitting in the corner of my trailer, monitoring. She interrupted my stories with corrections. That's not how it happened. She'd catch herself, change course. The person you're talking about sounds troubled. Stella doesn't need to hear about troubled people. But Stella was listening. Stella was hearing the gaps in Vivian's narrative, the inconsistencies. The way my stories about a friend always seemed to involve a mother who stole a daughter and told her the real mother was dead. I didn't push. I didn't need to. I just kept showing up, kept painting, kept being present in a way Vivian couldn't control. Because Vivian's power was in the narrative, the story she'd written, the role she'd cast Stella in. My power was in the face. In the real face, the one underneath the makeup, the one that remembered even when the mind didn't. The turning point came during a test shoot for a flashback scene. The script called for teenage Stella to remember her childhood, and the director wanted her made up to look 5 years old, the same age she'd been when Vivian erased me. I prepared the makeup in secret. I used techniques I'd developed over years, techniques that required knowing a face intimately, not just the structure, but the history, the memory mapped in bone and skin. When Stella sat in my chair that morning, I didn't tell her what I was doing. I just worked. I thinned her eyebrows to the shape they'd been at 5. I added a flush to her cheeks, the specific pink of a child who's been running in the sun. I softened her jawline, her nose, her eyes, not with prosthetics but with light and shadow, with the knowledge of how her face had grown, which meant knowing how it had been before. When I finished, I turned her to the mirror. She gasped, because looking back at her was herself at 5. The face she'd had before Vivian's management, before the diets, before the acting lessons and the image consultants. The face she'd had when someone kissed her earlobe and called it her listening spot. How did you? She touched her cheek, her nose, her lips. I remember this. I don't know how, but I remember memory mapping. I said quietly. You have to really know the face. You have to have memorized it. In the dark, over years. Stella turned to me. Her eyes, my eyes, were wide and wet and seeing something she couldn't name. Who are you? Before I could answer, Vivian burst in. She'd heard about the test shoot, come to monitor, to control. She saw Stella's face and stopped dead. For a moment, just a moment, she looked afraid. What is this? Stella wiped that off. You look ridiculous. No, Stella said. It was the first time I'd heard her say no to Vivian. I want to see. I want to remember. There's nothing to remember. This woman she's manipulating you. She's trying to what, Mom? Stella stood. She faced Vivian, 5-year-old face and 18-year-old voice, and I saw the moment Vivian's narrative cracked. Trying to make me remember that I had a mother before you, that someone used to kiss my ear and call me Mija, that you told me she was dead. Vivian went pale. You did. You told me Naomi was dead, that she didn't want me. But she's not dead, is she? Stella looked at me, and I saw the recognition finally land, the way it does in movies, slow, inevitable, transformative. She's right here. She's been right here the whole time. Vivian lunged for me or for Stella. I'm still not sure which. She was screaming, something about contracts, about lawyers, about destroying me, and security came, and the director came, and someone was filming on their phone. Of course someone was filming. This was a movie set, everything was content, and through it all Stella stood still. She stood still and looked at me, 5-year-old face and 18-year-old eyes, and she didn't cry. She didn't run. She just looked, and I looked back, and for the first time in 13 years we were mother and daughter in the same room, seeing each other. The video went viral, as these things do. Not the confrontation, that was chaotic, messy, full of Vivian's screams and security's intervention. The video that mattered was the quiet one. The one my assistant, Maria, had filmed from the corner. Stella in the makeup chair, looking at her 5-year-old face, touching her cheek like she was touching a memory. My voice off camera saying, you have to really know the face, you have to have memorized it. In the dark, over years. Stella posted it herself. No caption at first, just the video. Then, an hour later, second post, my mother spent 13 years painting my face in her memory. My grandmother spent 18 years painting my face in her image. Only one of them let me see myself. The comments exploded. The hashtags trended. Vivian's management company dropped her. The film recast Stella's role, not because of scandal, but because Stella refused to work with her mother on set, and Vivian refused to leave. The studio, faced with losing their star or her manager, chose the star. I didn't celebrate, I was too busy being terrified. Because having Stella know the truth was one thing, having Stella choose me was another. And having Stella in my apartment, she'd shown up the night of the confrontation, bags packed, nowhere else to go, was a third thing entirely, a thing I hadn't prepared for, a thing no amount of makeup school could teach me. She sat on my couch. She looked around my apartment, small, tidy, full of face charts and color wheels and no photos of her because I'd burned them all years ago because I couldn't bear to look. She looked at me. "Why didn't you fight harder?" she asked. Not angry, curious, sad. "Why didn't you tell me?" I tried, I said. "Your grandmother had lawyers, judges, a story that was easier to believe than mine. And you were 5, Stella. You were 5 and you believed her. And I didn't know how to make you believe me without hurting you more than she already had. You could have told me when I was older, 12, 15, something. I should have, but by then I stopped. The truth was ugly. By then I was scared, not of Vivian, of you, of finding out that you'd rather believe her story than mine, that you'd hate me for leaving, even though I didn't leave, that I'd reach out and you'd pull away, and that would be worse than not reaching out at all." Stella was quiet for a long time. Then she stood up, walked to my makeup station, picked up a brush. "Show me," she said. "Show you what? How you did it, the memory mapping. I want to see my face. The real one, not the one she made." I taught her, that night and every night after. I taught her how to see her own architecture, her own history, her own story. I taught her that makeup isn't about becoming someone else. It's about choosing who you want to be day by day, brushstroke by brushstroke. She wasn't my daughter, not really. Not yet. She was a young woman learning to see herself, and I was a middle-aged woman learning to be seen. We were awkward together. We fought about music and politics, and whether cereal was a valid dinner. She called me Naomi for months before she tried Mom and immediately blushed and changed the subject. I cried in the bathroom the first time she fell asleep on my couch, her head on my shoulder, her breathing slow and trusting. We built it slowly. A conversation at a time. A shared meal. A lesson in contouring. A fight about curfew. All the normal things I'd missed, compressed into months, accelerated by need. Vivian didn't go to prison. She didn't need to. She went to obscurity, which for her was worse. The telenovela reboots stopped calling. The book deal fell through. She moved to a condo in Florida and started a podcast about the dangers of cancel culture, which had 12 listeners, one of whom was definitely her. She sent Stella letters, which Stella didn't open. She sent me threats, which I forwarded to my lawyer. I didn't hate her in the end. Hate requires energy I needed for other things. I just stopped being afraid of her. That was the real victory. I opened a studio 6 months later. Not a makeup school, something smaller, something stranger. I called it Piel Propia. My own skin. It's for actresses, mostly. Young women who have been managed by parents, partners, predators who saw their faces as currency. They come in with stories like Stella's, like mine, stories of being painted into someone else's narrative, of losing the line between performance and self. I don't do therapy, I'm not qualified, I do makeup. I teach them to see their own faces, to map their own memories, to choose their own colors. Stella works there sometimes. Not as an actress, she took a break from acting, went to college, studied psychology. She works at Piel Propia as an assistant, learning the business, learning to be normal. She still calls me Naomi, mostly. Sometimes, when she's tired or scared, she calls me Mom. Both are true, both are gifts. She has a girlfriend now, a quiet woman named Jules who teaches poetry and doesn't care about Hollywood. Stella brings her to the studio sometimes, and I watch them together. The way Jules looks at Stella like she's seeing the real face, the one under the makeup, the one that remembers being 5 and being lost and being found. It makes me hopeful in a way I didn't know I could be. I'm 40 now. Piel Propia has a waiting list. I still work on films sometimes when the project is right, when the face interests me. But mostly I'm in my studio in my chair with women who are learning to see themselves for the first time. Stella is 20. She's in therapy, which she says helps, though she won't tell me what about. She's learning to drive, which terrifies me. She's learning to cook, which terrifies me more. She has my mother's lack of talent and my stubbornness. A dangerous combination. She's learning to be a person separate from her narrative, separate from Vivian's story, separate even from mine. The other day she sat in my chair, the same chair from the film set, which I'd bought at auction when the studio closed, and asked me to do her makeup. Not for an event. Just because. She wanted to look like herself, she said, but a version of herself that was ready for something. She didn't know what, just something. I painted her face. I didn't use memory mapping. She's not 5 anymore, and I'm not trying to recover what was lost. I used something new. Something we're inventing together. I called it future mapping, painting the face you want to grow into, the person you're choosing to become. When I finished, she looked in the mirror. She touched her earlobe, the freckle, her listening spot. She smiled. "Thank you," she said, "for seeing me. Even when I couldn't see myself, I didn't cry. I've learned not to cry in the chair. but I held her hand and I said, I'm still learning to see you too, Mija. Every day, every face. I'm Naomi. I'm 40. I'm a makeup artist who was once erased, a mother who was once stolen, a woman who learned that the most radical act isn't revenge, it's showing up, day after day, with your brushes and your patience and your willingness to be seen. And if you're listening to this, if someone painted your face without asking, told your story without your voice, made you believe you were someone else's creation, hear me. The face in the mirror is yours. The story is yours. The brush is in your hand. Start painting. See you in the next story.